for you to choose your preferred language. We will have a live translation for Arabic, English, and French. So please choose the language that you prefer. Okay, we're still admitting people. Okay. So hi, I'm Nadine Shah, and my pronouns are she and her. And today, Miriam Boulis and I will be your co-facilitators for the next hour or so. First, we would like to thank NGO CSW New York for helping us provide this platform today. Thank you for all today to make the feminist voices heard. Now, we have brought together this event to have a regional and local overview of the MENA region's feminist movements. We would like to shine light on the grassroots and communal solidarity among women of the regions in times of hardships and different layers of oppression. Our four speakers today will be voicing the issues that are dealt with regarding gender-based violence, the impact of COVID-19, Beirut explosion, LGBTQ+ communities, and so forth. Also, we would like to thank our instructor, Lina Abu Habib, for giving us this opportunity as interns to co-facilitate this event and be part of such a great cause.
So, first of all, thank you so much, Nadine, for introducing the purpose of our event today. I would also like to thank every person present here today who gave us some time of their busy schedules to listen to youth feminist voices from the MENA region in hope to maybe deconstruct all sorts of biases. I would also like to thank the translators, KHAWLA and Katia, for their support. And on a personal note, I would also really like to thank Lina Abu Habib, our instructor, for giving us the opportunity to be interns with CSW New York and for representing the youth of the MENA region and getting to hold this event with you all today. Last but not least, I would like to thank each of our valuable efforts and for their inspiring essence, really, for their extraordinary support under crisis in their relative environments. Thank you for all the efforts that you do every day and for the fight that you keep fighting in minds of chaos. I would like to remind everyone here today to please feel comfortable to add your pronouns, your Zoom names, your preferred pronouns, just for us all to not mess anything up and for it to be as a safe space as possible.
Thank you, Miriam. So our agenda today, we will be covering participation rules. We will introduce our guest speakers. Our guest speakers will take on the floor. And our colleague Safira will talk about the NGO CSW GAF Youth Task Force, and we will have an open mic and Q&A session.
I would just like to know if you are hearing me well or not.
You're good, Miriam.
Before I go into this. Can I just get a check if you're hearing me well or not?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
You're good.
All right, great. So for me, the first step to any sort of equality, it comes through grassroots organizing on the community level, with women just like me and you here today, sharing the space together and making our concerns visible and talked about. And so for this feminist space to be, and conversation to be the most productive and constructive as possible, I'd like to shed light on the principles of participation during this event. Please note that this is a safe space. We are all here to listen respectfully and intentionally without interrupting. And we are here because we're committed to learning something new and to criticizing an idea or challenging an idea or a concept and not on a personal level. Please avoid any sort of blame or speculation and make sure to also avoid any offensive or inflammatory language. Other points to keep in mind that frame our session today are to acknowledge that we are all taught misinformation today on the daily, and they're here to challenge and unlearn these traditional normative systems by deconstructing certain historical biases and stereotypes and traditional narratives. We trust that people here today with us are doing the best they can to learn, to grow, and to share. And lastly, but we also recognize all the different struggles of each group and community or individual in their own context. We recognize that all struggles are on a public and private scale. We also recognize the intersectionality with which this event has been framed from, and would like to be as inclusive as possible in our conversation and framework throughout this awesome event. So thank you for that.
Also, after we have heard our speakers, we will be having a briefing session where we will just mention some of the important points so that we can have a space for Q&A. So when we do have the Q&A, there you do have the option to raise your hand, and you can also be using the chat box so that you can jot down any questions. We can go back to them together, go through them, or you can even just raise your hand and go through the chat where you have your question and ask your question. We also have open mics, so the floor is open for anyone who would like to share their personal experiences. And we do focus on individual experience because no one should be required or expected to speak on behalf of a whole race or gender or certain group. But of course, everyone's experiences are important and very much acknowledged. But for the sake of hearing diverse voices and for the time, we would really like it if we could limit open mic for 2 minutes per person. So before we jump into our event, I know everyone's excited to hear our speakers, please be mindful that this event might be recorded and shared on other platforms. So it is a very safe space, but you should know that it would be beyond the frame of this call today. Thank you.
So here are our 4 guest speakers and
We seem to have lost Miriam. Yeah, Miriam just wanted to introduce our guest speakers. We have Diana Abu Abbas, KHAWLA BOUAZIZ, Maya AMMAR, and Dana Ash. Unfortunately, Nidal Al-Azhari, as you've seen on our flyer, she was supposed to join us, but unfortunately, she could not join us today as the event conflicted in time. But we do hope to host her soon at another event, of course. Hopefully, Miriam could join us again. Miriam, can you hear us?
about this electricity. Yes. I'm having some Wi-Fi issues. I'm pretty sorry about this. So I would, yes, exactly, internet in Lebanon. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, Diana Abu Abbas, an activist for sexual and reproductive rights and LGBTIQ+ and women's rights. She is the executive director of Marsa Sexual Health Center, which is our host organization for this event. Diana, please, the floor is.
شكرا مريم ونادين. أول شيء بحب أبلش لأشكر كل
Thank you, Mariam and Nadine. First of all, I would like to thank all the persons who are attending today's webinar, as well as all the eminent speakers. I would like as well to thank the persons who are covering the expenses for interpretation today in order for us to be capable of conveying the voices of the feminist people and to convey the differences that women in the MENA region are encountering today. In today's event, we would like to highlight the role of women as well as the invisible communities who are affected, deeply affected as a result of the accumulated crisis, ones that are casting their shadows on our area. As you know, most of the cases, the rights of women as well as the voices of women are being disregarded. All these voices are not taken into account in the post-conflict or in the recovery period. We know that their rights are not recognized and they are not given any voice in the decision-making process. The UN Commission in the United Nations is one of the most important entities that are intervening with the countries that are violating women's rights. And this is actually the arena that's allowing us to fight against the patriarchal society by means of a united feminist community. And this will actually help us start a network enabling us to overcome this exclusion. Today's purpose is actually to highlight these voices, the voices of feminist women from the field, women who are available on the ground, who are representing themselves by means of their personal representation. These voices confirm that we are not isolated and that our strength lies in our community and in the organization of the feminist movement. We have strengths in our union. If we are not united, then they will win. Of course, we do not want them to win. So from this tribune today, from this platform, and based on the principles of coordination and communication, we shall start today's discussion. You have the floor, Miriam and Nadine.
Thank you, Diana. Okay. So our next speaker is KHAWLA. So KHAWLA is a young feminist queer rights advocate from Tunisia. She has been working on community building and the creation of a safer space for LGBTQ+ youth in Tunisia for the past 4 years. Currently, she is the Secretary General of the initiative Mawjoudeen, We Exist for Equality, in Tunisia, and is leading projects on research focusing on LGBTQ+ people's demography in Tunisia, LGBTQ+ community. She hopes to emphasize on youth-focused approaches in the work that she does to create youth-led, youth-centered work from the youth to the youth. Now, this is a question to KHAWLA and to all the speakers. So how can we engage youth people in the feminist movements in our country? How can we give them a place at the table?
Hello, everyone. If you can hear me, I'm not sure. We're all good. All right, perfect. So thank you. My name is KHAWLA BOUAZIZ and I work with Mawjoudeen, We Exist for Equality in Tunis. And when I was first told about this event and I put down, I sat down and tried to write down my thoughts, I found that I'm writing like 5, 6 pages and it kept going on and on and on, which is unfortunately sums up how difficult the crisis has been going on in Tunisia. And when we talk about Tunisia and what Tunis has been experiencing today, we cannot look at it independently from the fact that we've been experiencing a 10 years long post-revolutionary process with the leftovers of decades of colonization and dictatorship before that. So when we look at Tunisia today, we find that we're facing an incompetent government that is dealing very poorly with a deadly pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, while at the same time practicing a lot of violence against its people and activists, especially. We're witnessing a lot of police brutality very recently with the arbitrary arrests of young protesters, human rights advocates, queer activists, feminist groups. And it's becoming an organized, systematic form of exclusion of these people from the political scene, from the civil society scene, which obviously is causing a rise in our sense of unsafety and uncertainty of the future of the movement, of the feminist movement in Tunisia. So this whole situation has affected us as a society and as feminists in many different ways. because we are finding ourselves in situations where there's no adequate means to support women and other marginalized groups that are finding themselves in lockdown and in very vulnerable economic and social situations, sometimes locked with their abusers, sometimes fired from their jobs because of the pandemic, and even more vulnerable than before. We're witnessing the exclusion of many groups from COVID responses. LGBTIQ plus people were not taken into consideration, sex workers, people living with HIV, people living in rural areas where they cannot easily obtain any sanitary products or anything like that. At the same time, there's still that continued violation against advocates who are arrested, sometimes kept under arrest unlawfully for extended periods of time in unsanitary conditions. One of the examples that I want to mention, that one of the queer advocates in civil society was arrested and detained in a COVID response center. So basically where COVID patients are recovering while he is tested negative. So he was just arrested and kept there for over 14 days, and we had no news about this person for a long period of time. And this is one example of the practices that have been going on. We're also witnessing a crackdown on youth groups specifically. Young people in general, especially the ones that have non-normative lifestyles or expressions, they've been the ones targeted the most by using arbitrary laws like the Article 52 of our Penal Code that prohibits the use of cannabis. A law like this has been used a lot recently to just, catch youth and always stick that law to them. Yeah, they're just using cannabis, even if it's not true. And it's been used very frequently in the past month or so, in the past 2 or 3 months, let's say. This has created a social division where it's becoming glaringly obvious that civil society scene in itself is split between our different priorities, between our different definitions of emergencies. What are we supposed to tackle first? How do we align our feminist issues with everything else that's going on? And another split in society in general, because do we still trust the government that left us stranded to deal with the pandemic on our own? Do we still trust a government where it's practicing a lot of violence, and we're seeing the police brutality on our screens every day? Young people, older people, we're all seeing it happening on our screens. So in this situation, feminist groups and queer NGOs and human rights organizations, we're all put in a sensitive situation where our already limited resources and spaces are limited even more. We're fighting, we're trying to provide all means possible for survival at this stage, whether be it financial support, psychological support, medical support, legal, to our communities, while facing a heavy clash from the government on our individual persons and on our organizations as well. And at this point, it's safe to say that it's very shameful in a way and sad to witness everything that's happening from a country like Tunisia, a country that uses international spaces like the CSW, like other spaces, to promote its progress, its inclusivity, the new form democracy, and all the good terms that they use. Well, the reality is the total opposite of these terms. The reality is that women, queer people, youth, and many marginalized groups are finding themselves further minorized and specifically targeted in many cases. So what we're trying to do is, as NGOs, as individual advocates, is rely on our solidarity, rely on our shared experiences, shared resources, trying to allocate budgets and funding and emergency response means between each other so that we try to manage in the best way possible this whole situation. And we're also relying on international support, which is like why I'm here, why many other advocates are trying to make our voices heard in spaces like this space. So hopefully we get out of the situation with the less damage possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, KHAWLA BOUAZIZ, for the great overview of the situation in Tunisia. Unfortunately, it was great, really great hearing from your perspective as a youth activist, especially with LGBTQ plus folks as well. So thank you a lot for that. And we will get back to your points later on before the Q&A. So our next speaker is Maya AMMAR. She's a feminist writer and activist who has experience supporting civil society organizations in the fields of gender, media, and communication. She has a BA in journalism and an MA in communication studies. She has previously led nationwide feminist media campaigns on issues related to family violence against women, sex trafficking, child marriage, abortion, personal status law, and the KHAWLA system. She currently contributes to various media outlets as a journalist, writer, and translator, and she produces her own feminist opinion videos and gender-focused articles in collaboration with independent media platform alongside her job. So Maya AMMAR, the floor is yours, but before that, I would like to maybe frame the conversation and ask, as a lot of feminist opinion videos are surfacing online today, during times of lockdown and COVID-19, how do you think that how do you think these feminist opinion videos and platforms are serving the cause, and what kind of impact have they had or are still having on young people's mentalities in the context of Lebanon? The floor is yours, Maya.
Thank you مريم. يعني رح بلش من مطرح ما خلصتي. يعني نحن
I shall pick up from where you have finished. This online space that we are trying to redeem. And here, of course, I could focus on something that's positive. We were capable of overtaking several spaces that were not ours as usual. In the offline world, as in the online world, we are always used that anything that's related to public space requires a ferocious battle in order for us to be capable of redeeming a space. In the online platforms, we are as well trying to take in some space because the narratives that we have, even amidst the pandemic and even in the traditional media, are no longer a true reflection of ourselves. I believe that this is a window of opportunity, though there is what we call a digital toxic. So though this digital word could be toxic, nevertheless, we were capable of creating something, letting us know that other persons are going through of what we're going through. Some people could resemble us, others are sharing ideas that we might discuss, though we might contradict. I believe that this discussion has gained the pace during the confinement, during the lockdown, when people were secluded in their homes. I believe that there is as well a large number of persons who are tired of this pattern of living. However, it was for us an opportunity to make sure that the narratives of the systems does not overtake the general overflow, the general flow of the situation, to remind us that though we have the pandemic, though we have the blast, we can not only talk about the blast and the pandemic disregarding our rights. We want everyone who is listening to the decisions, we need them to understand that we are affected double by the crisis, which means that we have the space, we have double the space. I believe that what we have done was not actually without any tangible result. It has actually unmasked the regimes, and when the pandemic has shown how actually faltering our regimes are, and how the pandemic has shown how failed our systems are, well, this has led to more coordination, to more solidarity among the different civil society organizations, not only among the feminist movements. Now, at one point, the feminist movements are becoming more and more united, despite all the challenges, because everything that this feminist movement had been calling for the past decades has been unmasked and has been actually reflected in a very tangible way to all the people. So all the things that we have learned as a result of the pandemic, and maybe this could help us in order to push further in the post-pandemic era to push for our rights. And I believe that online and offline, you're capable of showcasing some issues which are related, for example, to the sponsorship. To what extent will women continue to actually shoulder the direct consequences and burden of the crisis of the pandemic, of the virus? So women have become actually persons who are working, who are nurses, who are teaching, women who are taking care of the cooking, cleaning, as well as of all the house chores. And now we're supposed to see to what extent are we appreciating this effort, how are we paying for it as a community, and how are we distributing it more fairly, because women are depleted, they are tired, and the feminist movements are tired as well. It is true that they continued working and they have continued doing what they actually do, because we are living in failed states, but they are tired, they are drained, and at one point they do not have enough resources. This is why I believe that in our discussions, and as women, as young women, will be capable of bringing all these issues to the surface once again. We were capable as well to highlight the matters of violence. However, what we have overlooked is how this violence or the patterns of this violence have changed. In Lebanon, for example, domestic violence, and as an observer, has increased in terms of figures in Lebanon. Well, of course, the crimes have already existed at the same pace. When we talk about 13 to 25 cases of murder per year, well, this is not something new to me who has been following on this. What is new is actually the increasing figures by 100%, increasing figures in terms of notification. As KHAWLA already said, there are women who are stuck at home. They have no opportunity to get out of their home. And the feminist movements are still seeking ways to provide these services in a state that are less present, less available. So how these patterns have changed? Well, this is something that has been very obvious when we talk about electronic embezzlement, when we talk about electronic harassment, when we say that we are trying to overtake the online. We have seen violence that has been haunting us, and most interestingly is actually the increase by 307% in terms of the numbers of notifications, and we're only talking about the official figures. We always adapt and we always resist, but the same goes for the patriarchal society. It's a matter of breath. Whoever has the longest breath, I think that we as women have the longest breath. We are capable of resisting more, and we are capable of unmasking the failures. And it is clear that it is very important that many of the things we had echoed before need to be tackled as soon as possible, and all this will definitely work to our advantage. What I would like to say, we as feminist movements, we are not only working with the issues that are related to the services that are provided to women who are subject to violence, women who are subject to harassment, or when we talk about the marginalized groups or the female domestic workers. We are now working on handling an internal crisis because we do not share the same resources. Some women were social workers at organizations, and they have found that they are capable of supporting some of the women who are subject to this violence. And these women are subject to violence and they have 5 children to take care of. So some women do not have private rooms in order to continue their work. So what we talk about So what we talk about women, when we talk about women, well, this applies as well to the social workers. Many resources are even wasted and they are used in an inappropriate way. And some resources are maybe being devoted to the proper or improper places. We had a lack of shelters. Some shelters were no longer capable of accommodating women as a result of the COVID outbreak. There was as well an incapacity to following up on the situation of women before courts. So I believe that this is a discrepancy for us as individuals and as organizations. We were capable of seeing not only the social failure, but as well, we were able to see that our resources are not available in a way that is well sensitized in the web of our different situations. You still have 2 more minutes, Maya. There are many things that we can talk about. Maybe we can discuss this later on in the Q&A session. But when we talk about Lebanon, we cannot disregard the blast. The COVID response policies, as well as the blast response policies, were not sensitive to the rights or to the needs of women or to the persons from the persons who are marginalized or from the LGBTQ community, because many of the businesses owned in the affected area by the blast are women owned or are owned and run by women. And many of the households had lost their husbands in the civil war, which means that they are women-headed households. So we were the ones paying for the price of these consequences and of the situation. And women are the ones who managed to overcome the situation. And women, unfortunately, were the ones to pay the price for all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maya and Ammar. Are you done? Thank you for the glimpses of hope and for the empowering conclusions. I'm going to leave the floor to Nadine.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Maya, for everything you mentioned. And I think we will have a further discussion in the Q&A because this is a topic with a lot to be said on. Okay, so for our final speaker, we have Dana Ash. So Dana is a cultural and social activist, playwright, performance poet, and the founder and executive director of the nonprofit arts organization Haven for Artists based in Beirut, Lebanon. To quote Dana, Dana says, "What I do stems very deeply from who I am. Therefore, I cannot see myself doing anything else. I am a woman and a writer. I am an Arab and I am queer. I was raised in the West and in the East. I'm not simply an activist. I am whatever my city, my community, my gender, my fellow sisters and brothers require." These are beautiful words, Dana. Like, we want to hear more from you, please. Just a general question as well for you and for our other speakers. How can we bridge the gaps between generations when it comes to feminist activism?
Thank you all for having me and for organizing all of this. It's really wonderful to be in such a forum with such incredible feminists and activists. So again, thank you for that. How can we bridge the gap between all the different generational feminism? I think first of all is to ensure that we keep communications open. There's a lot of I think to our detriment sometimes, cancel culture gets ahead of our first mantra, which is to educate, which is to ensure that even if people are, they're in disagreement, there needs to be a forum for discussion. There needs to be a way in which we can convince each other. And if we don't, part of what we're fighting for is the freedom to disagree, granted to a certain extent, and as long as our laws and our rights are protected. But in a way, I will always protect someone else's right to hate me as long as I can also return that favor. So with us in Haven, I'm going to talk briefly about Haven. Myself as an activist, I exist particularly on the field in Beirut as a cultural activist, but also as a revolutionary, I would hope. I know that that's a big word. Some of us are always afraid to say that word because sometimes we fear not living up to that word. So I will, hopefully we all will get to a point where we can establish the bar of what is a revolution and how revolutions are actually undertaken. I do have to say that there is no such revolution without the women and LGBT community of Lebanon. What they have done on the streets and how far they've raised voices is beyond comprehension. I could say the same for Tunis and Morocco. Basically, women all over the world have, as Maya said, that's enough. And we are trying to reclaim these spaces. We're doing it in different forms. And How Haven does its own method of doing so is being that radical platform where we are unapologetic. We are a nonprofit organization that is led by feminist values and feminist ideals. We don't believe in cancel culture, but believe in education and organizing and agitating enough to provoke change and to do so collectively and together. Another thing that I wanted to comment on is something that KHAWLA said, which is that I think the biggest issue that we face as feminists and as activists is how people differentiate their priorities. I will say for the record, I don't care if I have electricity. Why? So he can beat me under the light? I don't care if I have water. So what? I could shower after I've been abused? These are all things that don't matter to me if I don't have the basic right of safety and security in my own space, in my own home, and outside of it in the periphery. Public spaces don't belong to men, they belong to women, and we will take them back, even if from their dying lips, as they say. So I believe a revolution spot on all fronts, and to do so, Haven and myself utilize the art community. We've created films, we've created a lot of different facets in order to raise expression and to be able to say that not only do we exist, you are unable to speak if not through our voices. You have to idolize every single marginalized community and every community in the world. There is no such thing as one is better than the other. You need to understand that they are all extremely and exponentially valuable to the existence of the human race and the continuation of progress and thought. So for that, I thank all of these panels because I don't know if you all know, but most of you on this panel are basically somewhat of inspirations for each other. I love Maya Ammar's writing. I adore Diana Abbas's initiatives. I met KHAWLA and Adwa 2 years ago, and since then we've always been on communication. So and of course, Dina Habib is definitely the mentor that has led us through a lot of dark times and has forced me to sit on tables that I disliked sitting on simply for the reason of saying that we need to be louder than the places that hate us. And that has been our initiative, and that will continue to be our initiative. We will always put our feminist feminist ideals first and foremost, and we will always prioritize the rights of all above the rights of the few. I'm going to end with that because I feel like I just gave a speech. Thank you all very much for having me. And I'm glad I can make everyone laugh because it is extremely tense in this country. And we'll talk more about it as time progresses when it comes to the blast, compounded with the financial crisis in Lebanon, compounded with COVID-19, and of course, the fact that women in the periphery of politics don't even exist. So thank you again, and I give the floor back to Nadine.
Thank you. So I'm trying to search for the reaction where I can clap hands. I can't find it, but I was getting goosebumps and chills like halfway through everything you said. Like, I'm just speechless, especially when you were talking about like provoking change collectively and together. And I think if we do want to just look back at what the speakers were saying, that is something that all of you or all of us are trying to do. We're trying to raise awareness and trying to use our platforms to voice these issues. So thank you again, Dana and everyone. Okay.
So the floor is open for anyone who has questions to the speakers, but before that, we'd like to maybe go through some points that were mentioned in our conversations. So something I personally highlighted and I'd like to take away is that no revolution without women and LGBTQ plus people in Lebanon. There's no such revolution without them. And thank you, Dana, so much for saying that and for voicing these concerns and for voicing these powerful words. Thank you for these beautiful conversations. And another point is that online platforms have helped, but have helped us overcome important, how do we say that? So they did help women push forward a certain agenda, but they don't come without the community level based organization that was done way before online resources. And so if anyone has questions, we can already go ahead and answer some. Nadine, if you want to add something about what the speaker highlighted, you can do that.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. There is something that was mentioned by both KHAWLA and Dana, and it's the challenges of what priorities you should focus on, what you should tackle. Like for instance, when KHAWLA was talking about Tunisia, there is police brutality, there's this continuation of violation against activists, and Dana, you even bring that forth. So that is something to also keep in mind, because these challenges like do exist. So yeah, and exactly what Miriam said about the revolution, it's something we both jotted down. So thank you for your thoughts. We do have, I think, some people raising hands ready to ask some questions. So. Okay, Shanta, we're looking at the chats as well.
Hello, I'll kick in. Happy to be here from the States. One thing that I have experienced, can you hear me okay? Is, of course, I'm in support of all of this. Working and fighting for women, you know, all equity, inclusion, diversity of all people, I guess. But one thing around something I experienced, and sorry if I'm a little bit wobbly with my words this morning, is I recently had an experience where I initiated something around women in leadership across sectors. And long story short, the idea was stolen from me and taken over by other women. And I think that this is another subset of issues that need to be raised among women, where we're working to find our voice, our place, our leadership. But sometimes people can be threatened and undermine other women. And I just think it's something to be aware of in yourself, those inclinations, and also just that exists. That's all I want to say. I won't go into the details of it, but it was pretty painful and very disrespectful. And if you know OMG, it was very unethical. And I'm still processing it because it's pretty recent. So I just would like people to discuss that subset of issues among women.
Thank you for sharing.
Is there space to respond?
Anyone have a comment at all?
I would love to, if it's possible. I don't want to take up anyone's time, though.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. So in that regard, I do agree that we do go through a lot of this.
Dana, can't hear you.
Kevin, I think you need to switch to the original language, because we were listening to a translation, maybe.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something I always bring up. Just because it's a woman in power doesn't mean it's the best person in power. She's still within an internal systemic structure that utilizes every tool possible to make her, in a way, abide by the system that is patriarchal and capitalistic. So I understand that sometimes it is extremely frustrating for us to be around women who are reinforcing the patriarchal and misogynistic ways of being. And of course, we cannot forget that feminism is anti-capitalist, right? And sometimes taking these ideas, even from each other, in of itself, an idea as a commodity, right? Something we can exchange, something we can build on and grow together with. So absolutely, we should always keep this in mind, but we should also keep in mind that our work is not just with men. Our work is with everyone. And sometimes we have to work on, like someone said, I believe, internalized misogyny. We need to work on it on multiple levels. You know, even within same-sex relationships, we always have this kind of issue of, okay, because we're trying to break the binary, we also have to remove the archiving and conditioning in which society has forced us to perceive our existence under. So I'm really sorry that happened. But sadly, I do see that there is work to be done on all levels. And
thank you for saying that, Dana. I think, I don't mean to make this a whole discussion, so I'll just say one more thing, and that is the lack of realization that that was an unethical thing, and that no woman came forward to advocate that that was unethical. Also, so not acting is not neutral. That's a huge thing to remember. Not acting is not neutral. Thank you for listening and
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen, for the comment, and Dana for your answers. There's a question in the chat box to all our speakers that says, my question is how we can make feminism more inclusive of women who lean towards more traditional female roles. If anyone would like to answer this.
If I can.
Yes, please.
I think, so the question is how, right? Let me just check again. So, yeah. So I think the first step is to realize that part of identifying as a feminist, of believing in feminism, is knowing that the whole notion of, we call it like Gen Z, we call it the pick me kind of syndrome, which is basically just that separation between we are the feminists, we are the progressive, we have the values, and then you are the women that are encouraging traditional female roles,
KHAWLA, I think we lost you. Where it's my Wi-Fi?
No, yes, we did lose KHAWLA in the meantime.
Can you?
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, we can hear you.
At which point did you lose me? I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes, sorry, internet is unstable in Tunisia too. So basically what I was saying, just to make it short, is that the whole notion of otherness, of dividing ourselves as women and putting like a box for the feminist, progressive, whatever, you know, labels women in one box, and then the women who still like fitting in a certain role, like being part of the traditional female role in another box, is in itself the first step into basically violating the whole concept of inclusivity, violating the whole concept of supporting women whatever and they choose to do and whoever they choose to be, even if we do not necessarily agree with that role or with that choice in itself. So for me, when I'm asked how to deal with that situation, is that we try to look at it from a more empathetic, understanding perspective than judging, because the fact that we straight away jump into the judging process and to being hard on each other is in itself a leftover of misogynistic teachings that we've inherited. So to look at it from the perspective of why is that happening, how is that happening, is it really as harmful if we tackle it in other ways other than judging? If we ask ourselves the right questions and try to work on them together with the women that we don't necessarily agree with their perspectives or the way they choose to fit in those roles, I think that's the way to go on dealing with it together instead of always sticking to the us versus them or othering these groups. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure. My thoughts got complicated right there.
Thank you very much, KHAWLA. This was great. I think we've got a couple of hands up. Sarah, Fahmi, can you go next, please?
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for all of the panelists. It was really refreshing to hear all of this and great. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I think a lot of you kind of spoke to different grassroots movements and different kind of working from the bottom up and youth activism and like different online platform activism. So I'm from Egypt, and I study Egypt and I work in Egypt. And something that I have consistently noticed with women's movements and with women's rights in Egypt, and this has been happening since like the kind of the construct of like the modern state in the 1900s, is that women are consistently included in public kind of revolutionary outcries and then consistently excluded when it comes to the constitution or political representation. And this has been kind of a recurring theme that we keep seeing on again and again. And I'm kind of curious what any of you might say about kind of how do we bridge the personal activism or what is happening in the communities and on the ground with more of a top kind of a more political top leadership in the country approach of representation with women, especially looking at like what Maya was saying about women are tired and women's movements are tired, and how do we kind of move past that so that we don't lose that steam as well. Thank you.
أنا رح يعني أعلق سريعاً على اللي قلتيه سارة اللي هو كتير
I would
صحيح.
like to pick up on what you have said, Sarah. I believe that we have to change our perspective to politics to start with. We always believe that after the protest and our involvement in the protest and how much effort we put into the protest and into the change, and then we are completely marginalized. We are not involved into the political process or into the decision-making process. I'm not going to say that we need to continue activism for obtaining a quota or that we should continue our activism to be actually accepted. I believe that we are way past the ready-to-use claims. Of course, when we talk about 50-50, this is something that's very important as well, but or equality. But I believe that what we need is actually to redefine politics. If we're going simply to talk about the occasions politics, because now, for example, we have municipal elections or that we have legislative elections, well, the definition of politics will remain unchanged. Though we as feminists, we want to change that definition of politics. We do not want to subscribe to the old politics. I believe that we want to talk about the different types of organization that we are doing and that need to resurface as a means of political involvement and political participation. It must not only be limited to how is it that we can bring together our efforts or the efforts that we are putting on the ground or in the virtual platform with future representation. It's about changing the mindsets, the political and community mindsets, to have them actually embed the different types of work that have been based on different approaches. So how can we impose all this as a type of politics? Because all this will one day reach this situation or a situation where we can have decisions. Second, what will happen is the following. So we are protesting, we are taking it to the streets, we are organizing ourselves. However, they are showing us that the public space is an open space. However, we are unable to reach it. No, it is not open to us. At one point, And as long as we have that many laws against women in terms of violence, in terms of the civil status, in terms of all the obstacles, in terms of the harassment, so upon removing those obstacles, we will be actually taking it a step closer to a safe space where we can be involved in the decision making process. But as long as these hurdles exist, then I believe it's very difficult for us to reach anywhere.
We have a question in the chat box that says, many of you speak of lack of fundings for women and LGBTQIA plus and youth organization, which is sadly shown everywhere. What do you think would be effective tools to work against this lack of resources? And what do you think can or should be done?
May I? So I always have this kind of comes up, the biggest issue, I think, when it comes down to even LGBT funding is the focus on men within the LGBT community or cis men. So the biggest, I think, also issue is understanding that there are a spectrum of needs within each community in of itself. And it is the biggest issue, I would assume, is that most of the funding comes from a place in which it is not directly connected to the needs of these communities. So we always, whether you apply for a fund, you have to fit these molds, these prerequisites that are based upon a capitalistic system that is flourishing within an oppressive systemic injustice. So what you're doing is you're looping, you're asking for help from the people that are reinforcing these very facets that oppress you in your country. And I think it applies for all of us from the MENA region in particular, is because all of our governments that we are trying to topple and overturn, or whatever the word would be, are funded by the international community. So whether we like it or not, Habesh is funded by the US. Habesh that physically abuses and punishes LGBT individuals and drug users. Instead of support, don't punish, as should be the requisite, it's not. We have the option of choosing rehab instead of going to jail, but very rarely do they ever allow you that option. It just usually goes straight to jail. Whether we like it or not, we also have 534 in the country. So all of these things, when it comes to funding, is an issue, because even if of itself, it's not up to us to define our needs. It's up to us to fulfill a proposal structure that fits the needs of that donor, and hopefully do to the best of our capacity to get our needs into that mold and that structure, which is extremely difficult and becomes tiring, especially when most of the funding bodies are also supporting, or these government bodies are supporting more systemic injustice, not just on a personal level. Because if we want to go back to the Infijar, the Beirut blast, look, international community jumped up, don't give any money to the government, don't give money to the government. But in the end, how is it coming into the country? We don't have access to our bank accounts. We don't have access to the port in which all of our aid is coming in through. So all of these things, it's very difficult to exist outside of this manzoumi, right? So I still have to go to customs to get aid sent in by another civil society member outside the country. We had medication and bandages and stuff come in after the blast. They didn't give it to us until 3.5 months after. So basically when the emergency portion of the program was kind of alleviated, then they gave us, and most of the boxes were open and half of the boxes were missing. So when it comes to how we can structure ourselves internally, I think it's a lot of relying on us. I appreciate Masalan, the work of my AMMAR, because she also brings forward terminology. There's a lot of issues with how we also communicate with ourselves and each other, how we identify personally and within these circles of themselves. Rehab for LGBT community, for drug use, because we go straight to jail. So there's no concept of, hey, we're going to help you rehabilitate. No, it's just, oh, you go straight to jail. We also have a lot of issues with how people with mental health are treated in jails. They actually have something called, until, I just saw this recently, until they are cured. So how does that, you go to jail if you've committed a crime, but you have mental health, you go to jail indefinitely. There have been people that are in jail for 80 years, 60 years, because they still don't know how to deal with these things. I think I lost my the original point that I was trying to make, but I hope I covered a bunch of others.
بس بحب زيد شوية على اللي قالته دينا، وأنا بوافق معها بكل شيء قالته.
To pick up on what Dina has already said, I totally agree with her. In terms of the funding, we as an organization working on the rights of the LGBTQ community, we always see that we have few resources that are related to the scientific research, such as, for example, I talk about the sexual reproduction and reproductive health. We know that there is a lot of research regarding sexual and reproductive health. We see that there is a lot of, there is actually a lack of documentation with regards to the to this category. So once again, based on our experience, we have found that documentation and research are very important. This will be a means for us to exert pressure on our governments. When I bring solid evidence and proof, and when I tell them that this is the type of work that we are required to do, and that this proof comes from the LGBTQ community. And once again, these are tools that we can use for advocacy, whether we're talking about local advocacy within the same country, or when we talk about regional advocacy. We are all organizations working together, coordinating together in order to actually advocate, or the ones that we could bring to international platforms, such as, for example, the CSW, or when we go to international conferences. So research is very important. Solidarity is very important, because only then we'll be capable of voicing out our concerns.
Thank you very much for the answers. We have a and it's Xian Lee. If you would like to go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you for the webinar today. And I have a question that I saw in the chat box earlier already, but I still just wanted to ask it specifically because I'm from Eastern Asia, but I live in Jordan right now. And I found it's the same problem. Doesn't matter which part of Asia or like in the Middle East in general. Is that whenever we talk about women's rights or feminism or any of these, I started to hear the voice that people are saying, oh, don't use this Western value that you're having. Or some people might tell me that, oh, this is a tool from those American countries, or like those European countries that try to control us. Oh, we're different. We don't need women's rights. We are already equal. So how do you solve this kind of problem whenever people see, let's say, when the organization that works for women's rights has a funding from one of the developed country, and then people will say, oh, they have money from those countries, and that's how they try to capitalize our country. So how do you solve this kind of issue?
في أنا رد.
I will answer, says Diana. So this is as well a problem that we all encounter here when it comes to the feminist activism that we have, or when it comes to the advocacy for the LGBTQ community. So, and this is as well a problem, as previously said, is something that we encounter as well when it comes to the research. We are part of the community, we are an integral part of the community. Those are our rights, and we are here in order to follow up on our work. I can give you an example of Lebanon. In the revolution that started by the end of 2019, where women were at the forefront of the protests, we have seen as well individuals from the LGBTQ community who were as well contributing and taking part, which means that we are required to show that we are part of our community. We have this kind of responsibility to assume. And once again, we need to make sure that we are protected, because as Diana already said, we are subjected to arrest, to kidnapping by illegal means. So based on this, we see that it is very important for us to shed the light on our presence and to deal with different organizations. Once again, I would like to reiterate the importance of solidarity and unity among women in all the active organizations.
I can intervene as well. Please go ahead. So basically, this is just a small example to respond to the question, because this is basically me and my father. my father, who believes that LGBTIQ plus is an agenda coming from the West, and the Zionists are forging a plan to destroy the Middle East and the Arab world. And I'm a young girl who's fallen for the trap. That's basically the gist. So the way that I think I tackle this conversation with him is the same way that I try as an organization, with as a movement, to tackle it on a bigger scale, which is first educate. Because many people, for example, talking about Tunisia, they don't know that the laws that criminalize homosexuality were put by the French colonizers. They weren't there before 1913. They have no idea. They think that it has been that way forever, but we tell them the French brought that law and they don't believe us. No, the French did. It was put there in 1913. Also, history. Look at our own history. Tunisians, when we talk to other, like the fellow Tunisians, look at our own Amazigh history. Look at our own history before the Arabs came to North Africa. There were many practices. I'm just going to call them homosexual practices, because at the time there was none of the definitions we have now, that people do not talk about. There are research that proves it. There are historians that worked on it. When we talk from the religious perspective, the same thing that I tell my father: read about scholars who are pro-LGBT, read from scholars who interpret religious texts from another perspective. Maybe that way you'll start to look at it from another perspective. Also, when we talk about, you know, the whole Western agenda and everything, although it's unfortunate, I try to make it a point that it's not even ideal and all rainbows and butterflies in the West itself. The part of the world that you say is leading us into a trap. No, sexism is everywhere, and homophobia and transphobia, it's everywhere. It's just that it's manifesting differently. In some countries like ours, like Tunisia, they have no problem to show violence and to prove that they're violent because there is no means of accountability. But in other contexts, that violence is exercised in different ways through other means. It's just more subtle, and people are not very aware of that. So if we try to steer the conversation into this direction, it becomes much easier to talk to the people who have these thoughts and to speak their language, to see it from their perspective, because for them it's something totally foreign. It's a topic that they are not used to. And especially now when we talk about digitalization and we talk about, you know, they're exposed to it much more. They cannot hide from it anymore. They're seeing it on their TVs and their phones as soon as they log onto social media. So at this point, the topic is here. And if we speak their language, if we look at it from the way they see it and understand that for them, it is shocking. And I know it's exhausting for us to be always trying to, you know, accommodate to them. And yeah, it is exhausting, but for our own sake, for the sake of our movement and our people, and to advance and not always stay stuck. And at this point, I think that's what we should be doing, at least from my part.
Thank you, KHAWLA. We have a comment in the chat from Sophie. Sophie is saying, does the feminist movement also include fighting for the right of female identifying men? I am speaking in English, Sophie, so that I am very clear to you, so that it doesn't get lost in translation. There's no such thing as female identifying men. In case you are referring to trans women, you are free to refer to them as women. I would like to also introduce you to the concept of the TERF, which is the trans exclusionary radical feminist, which is something that represents you. So let me be very clear. This is a safe space and we do not tolerate transphobia. Okay, so when it comes to sports, feel free to go do the research, and we accept trans women as women, and they are rights holders, and we are not okay with pretentious people who pretend to be feminists and try to exclude other members of our community who are very important. So this is to answer your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions. We do have some people who have raised their hands, and we do have some more questions in the chat, but we do want to give the floor to Safira. Her areas of work include youth empowerment, gender equality, and peace and security. And she currently serves on the executive committee of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York. So please, Safira, the floor is yours to discuss NGO CSW New York, the Gender Equality Forum Task Force.
Thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to be here with all of you. And that was such a rich discussion. Thank you to all of our speakers and those who engaged in conversation through the chat and through the Q&A. It was really, really wonderful. So some of you might be familiar with the Youth Leaders and Young Professionals program, which is part of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. And I wanted to share a few updates because the Commission on the Status of Women, which will be held at the United Nations, is only 2 weeks away. And part of what we've been doing in this series is trying to prepare ourselves together to engage effectively in that commission and beyond. So I wanted to share a few updates from the Youth Leaders and Young Professionals. We'll have a few updates that maybe Devin can share about the virtual forum, the NGO CSW virtual forum. And then I'll also share a little bit about the Generation Equality Forum, of which registration is open. So I'm going to put a number of links in the chat so that you have some of these resources. The first thing that I wanted to share is that the Youth Leaders and Young Professionals program is giving away five $5,000 grants for efforts towards gender equality at the grassroots. It's for young people specifically, but any project or any work that you're doing with an organization that is advancing gender equality on the ground, we encourage you to apply. Those links will be shared in the chat shortly. The deadline for those applications is the 1st of March. So you have just a week, less, a few days to get those applications in, but we encourage you to apply and to share with your networks too. If you know of anyone doing really good work on the ground, I think $5,000 could really support their efforts. We have a form for anyone who is interested in being registered as a speaker. So this is a speaker list that we're going to be sharing with NGO CSW and UN Women. They're always looking for youth speakers, youth who are very captivating, who are doing some interesting work on the ground. And it's just to register your name on the list. So you'll share your website, your biography, and you're kind of volunteering by putting your name on this list to be called on by anyone who's doing similar events during the commission and beyond the commission for the course of the coming year. So that's an interesting opportunity you might like to consider. We also have a survey if you are interested in contributing to the outcome document process of the Commission on the Status of Women. You can read the draft document, which this year is about women's leadership and participation in decision-making. And the survey is really trying to collect young people's perspectives on what to input into that negotiated outcome document. We also will be holding a few events during the commission, which will be opportunities that we're hoping to create for young people to connect with high-level actors at the United Nations. So we're hoping for some representatives from UN Women, some representatives from member states. So more information on that will be shared. We'll also share the link to the NGO CSW virtual forum in the chat, so you can register for that. That is free. It will be online. You just need to register and set up a profile, and you will have access to over, I think, 600 or 700 events that will be happening in parallel to the formal program of the commission. A few Generation Equality Forum updates. Some of you may be familiar with the Mexico and Paris forums, which will be happening this year. The Mexico forum will be happening from the 29th to the 31st of March online, and that registration is open. So I would encourage you to get in quickly and register for that if that is something that you're interested in. I'll also share the link to a newsletter that is summarizing a lot of the updates for the Generation Equality Forum. Keep an eye on the youth journey piece There's also the Action Coalition commitments and the Civil Society Feminist Agenda, which will also be shared. I know this is a lot of information coming at you in one shot, but I will share the links. I might turn to Devin to share any quick updates about the NGO CSW virtual forum, and then we can open up if there are any questions and I can further explain if there are things that are not clear. So I'll hand over to Devin and I'll put a bunch of the links in the chat and you can start looking through some of these opportunities that are coming up very soon.
Hi, everyone. Ooh. Sorry. Yes, so we are at about 8,000 registrants for the forum. The registration doesn't close, so don't worry about, a deadline for registration. You can register all the way up to and during the forum. We have probably more than 700 events throughout the 2 weeks. I just want to emphasize that you do have to have a profile and you have to be registered for the platform to attend any and all events. So just make sure you're registered and make sure you log into your profile. So you're going to get an email after you register with the login information to log into the platform. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I would just recommend, if you're interested in registering and joining any events, to check out our website, which has a lot of information, and just really review all the information that you can to really make sure you have a fulfilling and successful experience with our virtual platform. I know it can be a little bit intimidating and complicated with this new virtual space. So we're really just encouraging everyone, including ourselves, to just really buckle down and keep reading our resources that we've been sending out and materials to make sure we're all as comfortable as possible with this new virtual experience. Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat or send us an email at info@ngocsw.org. And I also just wanted to mention that this event is being recorded, so we'll send out the recording and we'll also send out all of these resources and links and everything with that recording as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Devin and Safira, for all the updates. And I encourage everyone to sign up at least in something they find interesting enough as an opportunity for them. So I would just like to thank you all for attending. I know we haven't taken all questions, but we are limited on time. We hope everyone enjoyed this event as much as we did, and we hope to have more of these crucial feminist conversations to bridge generational gaps and keep moving collectively. We would also like to thank Marsa for organizing, NGO CSW New York Youth for the support, and last but not least, the Mediterranean Women's Fund for supporting the translation, and for our amazing and inspiring speakers.
And everyone who joined as well, thank you as well for joining, for listening, for contributing.
Thanks, everyone.